action. I can't get no call to action, but I try, and I try, and I try.
Hello and welcome to Call to Action, the go-to podcast for anyone trying to make sense of the world of marketing, advertising, and beyond. In an industry that is a minefield of utter bollocks, we aim to capture our heroes and allies from the front line to have a chinwag with. It's like Pokemon Go, with the single but vital exception that it's not a short-term bandwagon of shite. It's brought to you by Gasp, and I'm Giles Edwards. Today, I've caught Walter Geer. Sport bike racer, track and field, all-American and seriously impressive fella, Walter is the holder of 6 US patents for digital ad formats, as well as many other ridiculously impressive accolades. Currently Chief Experience Design Officer at VMLY&R HEALTH, he bridges tech, storytelling, design, and user experience to create innovative design solutions to health. And to pack one more thing into this veritable sardine can of Walter's achievements, you have him to thank for skippable pre-roll ads on YouTube. Walter says, 40 under 40 and 30 under 30, I'm not impressed. Show me 40 over 40 and 50 over 50. Put a spotlight on the hard work that this group of individuals is doing while juggling life at home with a spouse and kids. That would impress me. Welcome to the show, Walter.
Hey, man, thank you. Wow, that was a hell of an impressive intro. I appreciate you.
It's downhill from there.
It surely is, man. Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me today.
Great. We've got 7 quick fires to warm up, Walter. So, number 1, Mac or PC?
Mac all day, man. PC, come on now. I mean,
No
other
offense
than
intended.
Dell, of course, our client.
Yes, of course. Caveat that. Number 2, track or field?
Oh, man, that's a hard one. Oh, man. Damn, I'd go with track. That's a tough one. That's a really good one.
They get tougher. Silver Surfer or Black Panther?
Black Panther.
Lee Clow or Paul Arden?
Ooh. Wow. I go with Paul Arden because I've read plenty of his books, and they're some of the most inspiring books I've ever read. And one of them was It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. I've literally kept that in my briefcase for like a year and read that almost weekly.
Yeah, I've read that in the research. Right, this is a curveball. Beats You Love Me campaign or Fearless Girl?
Beats. Oh, now you fucked me up there.
Got you. Nice.
So for the listeners, so Beats, the Beats campaign is one of my all-time favorites. But Fearless Girl is my mentor's work. So you try to throw a quick one on me. I mean, I'm just gonna drink to that one.
Okay. All right. Fair play. Well played. Right, 2 more. I think these are easier. So we got Jimi Hendrix one now. Purple Haze or Voodoo Child?
Ooh, Purple Haze.
Nice. And lastly, I don't know if you're a whiskey fan, Johnny Walker or Derek Walker?
I'm gonna go Derek.
Definitely.
That's a good one.
Nice one. Okay, awesome. Thanks for joining us, Walter.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me.
So listen, you're a veteran of the digital advertising space. You hold 6 US patents for digital ad formats, as I mentioned in your intro. You've worked for Google, New York Times, MySpace, many others before taking the leap agency side. But if we go right back to the beginning, what was your first ever job? And then what was your first proper creative job?
Oh, man. So my first, I had a job as a summer counselor working with intellectually disabled individuals, but my first job that I actually interviewed for was for a company called J&W. So J&W was like a clothing store. It was like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie House Party with Kid and Play years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So it was like It was a store where you could literally get that type of shit. It would be like yellow suits, orange suits, green or purple suits, multicolored suits, and like I would go in there and lie daily to people. People like, you think this looks good? I mean, it looks fucking amazing. Yes, you need to get the matching socks too. I was just lying to people to get the upsell, and but that yeah, that was my first job. Oh man, that brings back memories.
Nice, nice. And how old were you then when you were working there? Was this during
I
like,
was,
were
I
you at college or anything like
I was
that
sick.
at the
No,
same
no,
time?
I was 16. I was 16. That
Mm.
was in Colony Center, upstate New York, in this mall. And so, like, yeah, I used to get dropped off for a while until I got a car, and I felt like I was the coolest dude, man, being able to work there.
Did you have to wear the apparel you sold in the store while you worked there?
I did not, thank God.
Ha ha ha.
I
That's a
wore my
shame.
own stuff, but I just felt horrible for like lying to people about these god awful suits that they were buying for like I think it was like $130 or something like that for a jacket and pants and a matching tie and shirt.
Ah, nice. I'm always really interested. And the reason why we ask this
Mhm.
question and we ask guests to talk about the beginning of their career is because I think that it's far too easy, especially for young folk nowadays, to get really anxious about there being this kind of quote unquote right way to get into the
Oh
industry.
yeah, yeah.
So how did that look like for you? Because I find that most people take a really scenic route and almost trip over and fall into the industry.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I mean like my first creative job it's I guess was I mean creative was probably New York Times, right? Because that's where I really
Mm.
I was the New York Times first rich media hire ever, right? And so that's when like for those listening, rich media is like when you were going into like flash banners and the peel away ads and expandable banners were just starting to pop up. And I think, when I got there, it was interesting because I was allowed to be inquisitive and we just made random shit. And it was kind of cool. Um, but like when I was there, it was also part of the team that invented sequential messaging, which at that time we called surround messaging, surround sessions, and those are the ads that basically like follow you everywhere you go. But throughout my career, from like that was an interesting part of my career because it allowed me to be inquisitive around design, right? And so before then, I had been doing like some basic HTML, JavaScript, but I was just like making tables and then just putting words on pages. And so the New York Times gave the ability to really think a little more out of the box and think about like, okay, well, what could we do on this screen? And since then, my entire focus has always just been trying to follow the ball, right? Where is technology going? Where can I actually touch it before other folks? And how can I be creating things that mass amount of people touch and engage with and see? So there's no right or wrong way to how you go about getting to a C level creative or executive. I think everyone has their own way of getting there, but for me I think it was just built around inquisitivity, being inquisitive,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and just kind of bouncing around doing whatever. Like my whole thought was, if I can be a pentathlete of the sort, right, and do a whole array of things, then I'm going to be a hell of a lot more hireable. But I also earlier on in my career focused on, okay, but if I do this, I need to go to like the biggest companies possible, the biggest, most well-known names, because the bigger the name, the easier the next job will be to get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's smart. And is that something that was in your head from the off? Is that partly why you even first applied to work at the New York Times?
Yeah, I mean it was because I was, I always kind of looked at it as I just want to go where the best where the best people are, right? Where the best work is and the best talent. And and it led me to, some really interesting places and allowed me to meet some incredible friends that I still have today, or individuals that inspired me to be better at what it is that I do. Because I tell people all the time, like it's so important to be around people that are smarter than you, that think different than you, that look at a project or look at something differently than you. Because like in order to grow within a creative space, you have to be, a jack of all trades. You have to understand a lot of things. You have to be up with technology because it moves at such a rapid pace. And the only way to do that is by having the right people surround you.
Yeah, nice. I remember my first ever agency job. In fact, it was around the same sort of time, I suspect, where we had what was called the rich media department, and in this
Hmm.
room there was like 3 or 4 guys. No one really understood what they did, and I don't think they really understood what they did at the time either. But you mentioned about how kind of exploratory and innovative it was because you were right at the front. You were kind of in this space of new tech, and actually that sounds like a really exciting place to be because it was new enough that it hadn't then become formulaic. There was no best practice because there was no even practice. Is that the bit that you found really kind of interesting
You're
and
yeah, you're
exciting?
100% right. You're 100% right because earlier on it was like you have a screen and what could you do on it? And the real estate on a on a monitor on a laptop is fucking gigantic, right? So and because it was such like it was like the Wild Wild West, right? And so like you could do whatever it is you wanted. Like the more inventive, the more creative it was, the more money you could potentially get, right? Like I created one of the when I went to MySpace. Part of my role was okay, like we have to drive incremental revenue because users are falling off a fucking cliff thanks to Facebook. And MySpace had like 55 different fucking sections of the page of the site. Like it did all these different things. You want this, you want that. It's like holy shit, like it was way too much, right? And Facebook focused on one thing. The activity stream. Done. Post, let
Mm.
people see what you're doing, comment, etc. And so it was really interesting is, being at a place that is bombing, right? There's so much opportunity for growth and learning because like they were literally like do what you want. And so we were getting at the time like homepage takeovers were a big deal. We were getting like $300,000 a day for a homepage takeover. I built this usability lab, and through this lab I ended up inventing something called HD Skin. HD Skin. It was the very first time the entire industry started using video as a background for an entire page. So I
Yeah.
kind of did this. I did this. I did an ad for it. It was like the Facebook movie. I forgot the name of it. And that Facebook movie ended up running on MySpace's homepage, and we ended up getting like $1 million for it. So I created a format that took our takeovers from $300,000 a day to $1 million a day, off a whim because our CEO was just like, "Do whatever. I don't really care." And at the time, no one would put a gigantic fucking video behind the entire page of your homepage, let alone like MySpace running a Facebook movie ad, which ended up getting a ton of press and laughs and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's like it was different then because now innovation, because your mobile devices are so small and the real estate is so small, innovation now is about the use of data, right? And how you manipulate that data to understand who an individual is and then deliver something that's highly relevant. Whereas 15, 20 years ago, it was how can I get the most intrusive shit as big as possible in front of someone to get them to potentially tap on it, right? So it's most certainly changed.
And so it sounds like that's the bit you've followed then ever since that time at the New York Times, because I think it would be an easy mistake for someone to make to think I've started it at New York Times, got this role I love, but I'm at New York Times, therefore my next gig needs to be in a similar kind of publishing media type space. But actually, it was the tech and the innovative use of technology which was the thread.
It was. It was. It was. And it was, I was always just interested in like how you can actually engage consumers in really impactful, interesting ways. And again, I like to always say too, like some of the best creatives I worked with in my career are people that are just inquisitive. I think that makes an incredible creative, someone who's just constantly thinking about what's new, what's the big thing, and understanding the lay of the land and launched what app and who's doing what. I mean, that's what makes someone incredible at a creative role, right? Because they're able to take those ideas, bring them together, and create incredible solutions for their brands.
Your first few roles that you took, then you've mentioned MySpace as well. Was it all client side, that kind of brand side roles? Because I know you at some stage you switched to agency side.
Yeah, they were like publisher slash ad tech companies, and I think the reason why is because my thought at the time was if I can build it or if I can come up with all these different ideas, then I can actually have all these different brands and all these people run it and whatnot. And it wasn't necessarily the case. See, ad tech is cool because you get to do the coolest shit before everyone else does it. But the problem is you're the last on the RF, like last person to get the RFP, right? So the RFP goes to the agency. Agency starts thinking about the big idea. Then the RFP goes over to the media agency. Media agency starts thinking about where they're going to run it, and then media agency in some cases will tap into the creative agency to understand what it is we're working on, campaign, get assets, and then they're doing basic shit. And then as they're deciding for platforms, you got this third party, ad tech company who says, hey, what about me? Can I actually, you could actually run this. Let's do this cool ad. And then media agency says, well, idea is already built. This is what we're doing. If you can take these assets and make them fit into what you're doing, then cool. Right. And so it's like so I've started to realize, yeah, this is cool making all this shit, but like I'm at the tail end of every fucking thing. So I just felt like I wasn't really influencing the work that these brands were doing. So for me, I had an incredible opportunity to go over to TBWA and work with, Jonathan Isaacs, who's their chief creative officer, and he brought me into a role there, and it was really eye opening, right? Because like I've never done health. I kind of was in a point in my career where I felt I've done literally everything I could in terms of innovation on these devices and on these screens. And I had the opportunity to work in health, and a gentleman, good friend of mine, Brian Gaffin, brought me in there, and it. At first, I didn't think I could do it. Right, I was like, "Well, health. Let me see. It might be interesting. We'll give it a shot." But it gave me an opportunity to get into the agency world and understand how agencies work. And then I ended up realizing, well, shit, this is actually really interesting stuff. Because while I was doing, putting asses in seats at movies or putting feet in sneakers and people in cars, like that really wasn't making a difference. But
Mm.
working on campaigns around like different types of cancer and fibroids and all this stuff was wildly interesting to me, because I actually realized I was making a real impact on people's lives and whatnot. So that is kind of how I got into the agency space. Being there for a year and a half, I started talking to VMLY&R, and they gave me an opportunity to really come over here to larger role and not only do health but do a lot of non-health stuff too. So being able to work on brands like Coca-Cola and Ford and New Balance has just been really exciting. So I get really the best of both worlds when I'm here. The opportunity to do the inventive stuff with some of the biggest brands, most well-known and iconic brands in the world, but also, being able to do work for pharma brands that are making a real impact. I mean, Pfizer is
Yeah.
one of our clients, and we launched Comirnaty. I mean, how many people can actually say they work with a brand to save the world?
Yeah, yeah. There's two observations there that I've made, and one is that kind of observation that you said you were like the last to get the RFP, and so I suppose that going agency side, in effect, you're moving up the food chain, if you like, and
Right.
you're
Yeah,
getting to
exactly.
eat that problem sooner. But also, one of the, I think, criticisms quite fairly of people in our industry, if I talk really broadly about it, is we can take ourselves far too seriously in general, and one of the retorts that you often hear is, you're just doing advertising or you're just doing
Hmm.
marketing. You're not saving lives here. You're not curing cancer. But of
Yeah.
course, actually, that sidestep into health, from agency to health, I suppose, you literally are involved
Oh yeah.
in that. So there must be so much more rewarding and actually very different to probably a lot of our listeners' experiences of working in agencies.
Oh yeah. It's so different, man. It's it is. I can't even explain the feeling, because I've been in this space for like 23 years now, and I feel like I've done some cool shit. But like the work that I'm doing now, just think is just the type of work that's making a real impact. And I don't know that people really look at health in that manner. And I think the reason why is because for so long, health was like looked at as like the place where people go and die, right? You go and die, you go and retire here in that space, and that they're like 10 years behind everyone. But in fact, the pandemic pushed pharma companies like such a pace that, not to say that they are on par with some of these other companies that are out, but like they're pretty fucking close. And if you start to look at, like, again, like the most popular, most well-known brand in the fucking world today, it's a pharma client. It's a pharma company, excuse me. Pfizer. So I think things have shifted, and I think that one thing the pandemic has also showed us is that health space is actually the safest space to be, right, in terms of employment and whatnot. And people don't get that they also pay a shit ton too. So it's a good place to be for people that really want to make a true impact.
Yeah. So you're the agency's first chief experience design officer. I don't want to get too bogged down in titles because I think that that can easily happen in our industry. But what does a chief experience design officer actually do?
So we have the role here within the agency, but for the health space, sorry about the noise in the background. For the health space, this was the first chief experience designer, like role,
Yeah.
right? Chief experience designer, and so it's interesting. I think that my role is interesting because, when we look at the health space, I think that so often we just look at like the and anyone you talk about health and what do people think? Oh, it's the ads we see on TV late at night, and it's like they got like 45 minutes worth of shit that tells you all the wrong stuff that's going to actually happen if you actually take this pill that's supposed to make you better, right? Like you're going to shit, you're going to go to da da da, you're going to die, and it's like crazy, right? And so I think that for so long it was like this focus on just the sites or just these commercials, and realize that to get an individual engaged, right, and to inspire individual, it takes a hell of a lot more than that. It takes understanding who they are, what they do, where they go. It takes creating these consumer journeys, not only consumer journeys but HCP journeys. HCP is healthcare provider and or doctor, right? So it's taking a look at these different journeys, seeing where they intersect, and understanding that engaging them means a multitude of platforms have to be used, right? So it's thinking beyond the more traditional stuff that we've done and start to think about, well, how do we activate across social? How do we actually inspire and educate through AR and VR? How do we actually bring individuals together by way of wearables, which wearables is becoming just a wildly successful in space to be in. And when you start to even look at some of the largest companies in the world, look at Amazon and all these companies that are literally getting into health, Apple, Google, like all these devices track health, right? So
Mm.
there's a reason for that, right? Because I think that we're understanding that you know like what we do now is it's so important to understand more about who we are, understanding our health in real time, like all of that information. So doing that means creating experiences that really drive and entice people, right? And I think that now in my role, my partner is a chief creative officer, Oj, and that's her name. And while she's incredible, like she understands that she, as a copywriter, she feels like, well, my partner shouldn't be an art director, which is a common put art with copy. She's like, my partner should be a technologist, right? And while I'm a technologist, I'm actually an individual that understands just how to actually drive engagement, right, in a multitude of ways. And so together what we're able to do really is sit, understand a problem that a client has, and then really think thoroughly through how to actually reach them in a way that actually is magical, memorable.
Yeah, well said. There's so much, and you hinted earlier about the big opportunity at the time, and even so, arguably now today is obviously data. I think since you left New York Times and the idea of ads following you around, they've become so intrusive that it's led to this kind of mass ad blocker
Mhm.
installation worldwide. I can't remember the figures, but I know it's approaching 300-400 million. Do you find yourself with a kind of moral obligation at all when you're dealing with wearable devices that track so many personal health details?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that people have to get comfortable with the use of their data and understand more about what is being done with their data. And I don't think that there is enough transparency when it comes to that, right? And,
Yeah.
and quite frankly, I think a lot of it is also difficult for a lot of people to understand, right? So we look at we you know we look at autonomous vehicles, right? I'll give you this example. Tesla, right? The thing that Tesla does so great is that that is a vehicle that can literally drive itself. Okay, like you put in your address, you press a button on the steering wheel, you let it go, and it will stop at stop signs, it'll stop at red lights, it'll take a left turn, right turn, it'll like the whole 9 yards. It'll get from point A to point B without doing anything. Now, now, people are not comfortable with that yet. I mean, there's people who have it, but like a lot of the world is not ready for that. In theory, right, what they have done an incredible job at is slowly integrating technology and ways to get you to kind of get there without pushing it all on you at one time. So here's how. If you look at the 2022 Model S and the Model X, right? The steering wheel is now like a Formula One race car wheel. It's half the size of a regular steering wheel, right? Doesn't do that big circle. It's like a little small rectangle, right? So they're slowly eliminating the steering wheel. You look behind the steering wheel, where you would typically see stalks, to turn signals and whatnot, and forward and backwards. Well, there's no stalks there anymore, right? They're entirely gone. So what it does is it uses AI and looks through the cameras and will recognize whether you need to go forward or backwards based off where you're parked. You can also slide it forward or backwards on the screen to the right of you. Okay, so now they're eliminating the stalks. So it's like there's slowly when you get into the car, by the way, you just put your foot on the brake and then the car door automatically closes. Or when you walk up to the car, it recognizes your mobile device and the car door automatically opens. Right? So they're slowly eliminating things, right, from you, and then eventually will get you comfortable with the fact that I will go and sit in this car and there will be no steering wheel. I'll go and
Yeah.
sit in this car and there'll be so my point in why I say that is because I think that as an industry we need to be more transparent with what it is that we're doing, right? But also slowly walk them through this. Hold their hand through, because if we dump it all on them at one time, it's just going to be way too much.
Yeah, I like that point. I also like in the research there was an interview that you gave to, I think, Med Ad News,
Mhm.
where and apologies, this might sound like a more trivial
That's fine.
example, but it really, when I read it, it seemed so so obvious why chat boxes typically feel so alien and I'm so uncomfortable with them. And I think the point you made was that the trouble with a lot of chat boxes online is you get an immediate answer. So it immediately doesn't feel human, because a human would consider for a few seconds and then respond. But even that timing and making something feel more human is going to make it feel more natural, and you're immediately going to be more comfortable with that tech.
Oh yeah. I mean, and this is that is a great example of just thinking through like how you actually enter, how a brand enters an individual's life, right? Because if it's done in a way that starts to feel more natural, more authentic, right, then you're more likely to engage with that brand, right? Because to your point, like when you type something and it automatically shoots you back an answer, it feels like, oh gosh, this is like definitely this computer, right? But if that subtle pause, that wait, you see the dot dot dot, and it makes it look like someone's typing, that makes it
Yeah.
feel like, okay, I might be interacting with a human. I feel a little more comfortable now.
Yeah, completely. I also liked in the same interview, by the way, there was I was having images of of penguins. This might sound a bit rogue, but I don't know if you've ever seen penguins when they need to test if there's a killer whale in the water, and they all gang up on each other and push one in to check. And the line you use about tech in the industry is that everyone's in a race to be second. Like that second penguin is able to jump in, and it makes so much sense because again, you don't want to implement new tech when we are talking about literally lives at stake. So, like, how does that differ to how maybe your experience with MySpace, New York Times, and elsewhere, where you're literally pioneering and you're at the forefront, and yet the stakes are so much more significant that you do want to be that second penguin, to use my
Yeah.
terrible metaphor.
Yeah. No, I think that's, and damn, you've done your research. Holy shit. So here's the thing, man. I think it's interesting because everyone wants to be, to the quote I said earlier. Everyone wants to be first, right? But there's this fear in health. It's interesting because to your point, like no one wants to make a big mistake. So I think that my job and the job of the agency is really, how do we actually inspire them to make that move by essentially by showing them that it can be impactful, by showing them that it can be effective. I think part of that is in how we present the work and how we actually then hold their hand through that process. Now, the difference is
Mm,
that on the health side, yes, it's going to take longer, because when you're doing something that's drastically new, right, you have now a full legal team on their side who's involved in assessing the work and making sure it's right and sure you're saying the right things and doing the right things. So that then holds up the process quite a bit, right? Whereas
mm,
other companies, quite frankly, are more than willing to jump in, because like for them it's like, hey, it's not a big deal. We screw up, then okay, we'll get back to it. I think that more brands need to understand that screwing up is okay, but like you don't have to go and create something and do it at mass scale, right? It's test in small groups, see if they actually work well, see how people react to it, and then build based off that experience and or kill it.
Time, weather, and
We interrupt this podcast to announce that we will never interrupt this podcast with ads. Ads that awkwardly nudge you to contact the pod's host Giles at gasp.agency. Only last week, some pod listing companies did just that, calling for guidance on research and brand positioning. But we're definitely not asking you to do that. Anyway, back to the show.
I call it the golden circle.
Yeah, golden shower more like. You don't want Simon Sinek, you want a proper marketing chat, don't you? Hang on.
I would
Oh, that's
normally wait a minute before jumping into listener questions, but we've got a friend of the show who's actually snuck an extra one in. So I'm gonna go to listener questions now, if
All
that's
right,
good with you, Walter.
go for it, man.
So, asking the general public for their opinion, be it on Brexit or boat names, is notoriously fraught with danger, but that's not stopped us asking. So, great friend of Walter's and great friend of the show, Derek Walker. Derek asks, you've mentioned sending the elevator back down. Why is that so important? And why do you think more people don't embrace this thought?
That's a good question. I think many people are essentially stuck in their own worlds. And when I say stuck in their own worlds, I mean they get to the top and have this feeling of, hey, you know what? I'm good, right? I'm good. I've made it. I've got this nice fancy car outside and this fancy house and my pool in the backyard. I don't have to do shit now, right? So it's a very selfish way of thinking, and whatever, to each their own, right? Everyone has their reasons, but I think that because of that, we have grown into this society where like people are just like they just it's I don't know if I want to call it greed, but just people just kind of get caught up in their own worlds and doing their own thing. I think that we're in this time now where we all talk about diversity and the importance of diversity, and I don't know that many people are doing a lot. And when I say like many people, I mean people of all walks of life and people of all colors, right? Because not all skin folk are kinfolk, right? But I say all the time that like when I say send the elevator back down, like helping someone else or creating opportunity for someone else doesn't cost you anything, right? Like a 10 to 15-minute conversation can make a drastic impact on someone's career. And I think it's important because we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to this society, we owe it to this world, we owe it to this space that we work in called advertising to make it better. And the only way we make it better is by ensuring that we are pulling up the right people to do some of this work. And when I say the right people, I mean ensuring that we have a multitude of ethnicities, genders, sexual preference, like all of that, right? There should be disabilities, which we often don't talk about as well, when it comes to diversity or DEI. It's just important that we create a table that looks like the rest of the world and society to ensure that we are, just leaving this place in a better space. We have to understand, we are, and I say this all the time, we're a dot on a timeline that is potentially infinite. So our time here, 70, 80, 90, 100 years is fucking nothing. It's here today and gone tomorrow. So, for me, what I look at is, how do I leave, what is my legacy when I'm gone? Like, what do I leave behind? And it's not the job I had, and it's not like how much money I made or the shit that I bought, because that can all be gone in an instance. It's how many people you actually made an impact on, how many, individuals you've helped, because helping one person, you help more than just one person. You help a family, you help a multitude of people in that person's life.
It's terrifying when you mention about it just being a dot on an infinite timeline, but then I suppose it's also inspirational, right? Because how impactful do you want that dot to be?
Oh yeah, it's so true. But like, the things that we do, the smallest things that we do can make a ripple effect.
Yeah,
A
yeah, for
massive
sure.
ripple effect.
Derek's other question that he snuck in was, what was your biggest aha moment about the differences between how pharma agencies work and general marketing agencies? So I accept that we've kind of touched on a few points already, but is there anything else that you can add?
No, it's interesting. When I first got in, like, there were so many different. I'm still learning today, to be like 3.5 years in, but like, there's so many different terms and things in words used that I had no idea about. Like, they call like a conference, they call a congress, right? So it's just weird. So it's I'm like, all right, whatever works. It's weird to me, but I think that you know when thinking about pharma, I never thought about the like how many people you're trying to reach, right? So when you're thinking like traditional advertising, let's call it whatever, like Dell or Coca-Cola, whatnot, like you're most cases you're trying to reach a consumer, or unless you're doing like B2B, right? But like on the health side, it's like you're trying to reach a consumer, also known as a patient. You're also trying to communicate with HCP, also known as a doctor. You're also trying to communicate with a caregiver, right? So like I've never really gave so much thought to this. I thought it was just like, oh, you just sell some drugs and that's what it is. It's so much more than that. It's really understanding these individuals' lives and understanding when the right moment to reach them is. Because we start to, in most cases, most brands will work on a consumer journey, and that journey will be like, hey, they wake up and they do this first, and then they go here and they commute to work, and this is where they like to work out at the gym. This is where they like to eat. This is what they like to shop and buy. But that changes drastically when you're talking about, an individual who's on a potential medication. So if we take, for instance,
Yeah.
like cancer, right? Like the how I reach them the week they get diagnosed, or the month that they were diagnosed with cancer, is going to be wildly different from how I reach them the first time they get chemo, which is going to be wildly different from the first time I reach them when they've come off tamoxifen, which is a drug you take for 4 to 5 years that helps prevent the cancer from coming back.
Yeah.
And once you stop taking that, there's that like oh my gosh, like am I going to be okay because I stopped taking this? Is it
Yeah.
4 to 5 years? I might have messed up how much time that is. But so like how you like there's an entirely different person at those three stages in terms of how they're looking at life, and then how the brand then continues to have a conversation with them. So in pharma, like it made me realize that like how you communicate is like this everlasting kind of communication where their mood, their temper, what they do, all of that changes, and you have to be hypersensitive to that more so than any other traditional brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely right. Our last listener has asked to remain anonymous, and she says, I work for a healthcare agency in Australia. Looking ahead, should I worry that this is perhaps too niche to join a non-healthcare agency in the future? And you made an interesting point earlier, Walter, about the context of the pandemic has actually kind of heightened the significance of the pharma space.
Yeah, so this is a really common question. I think it's a really good question. It's easy to get stuck in any space, right? If you're if you continuously work on CPG brands, it's easy to get stuck in on CPG brands as opposed to others. So like, with pharma, yes, I will say that once you get in, if you're in there for a while, it will most certainly be a little more difficult to hop out of health, right? Because most folks will look at you and say, hey, you don't get this space, or you don't get entertainment or whatnot, or fashion or whatnot. So I think it will be a little hard, but I think that the nice thing is, there are agencies like ours where our teams are working on health stuff, but they're also working on non-health stuff. That's what attracted me to come here, right? It allowed me to work on things like Coca-Cola one day, and then the next day work on, Genentech or AstraZeneca or Pfizer. So there are other opportunities out there like that. I would say look for some of those, but also don't be afraid to get in, because if it's something that you enjoy and something that you love, like make it happen, make it work, right? But I always tell people, go after the shit that makes you feel inspired. Go after the shit that allows you to wake up every day and get excited. And sometimes it takes a long time to actually find that.
Yeah, for sure. Well said. So the final part of the interview then, Walter, is our 4 pertinent poses that we put to all of our guests. They start with, what advice would you give to your younger self?
The advice I'd give to my younger self would probably be, honestly, just be yourself. Be yourself and show up. I think, we all, like we all get to where we are based on who we were at one point, things we did, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm happy with what I've achieved, and I'm most certainly happy about where I've come. So I don't think that I would change anything. But I think that if I was able to understand earlier the power of being you, I think that I could have probably accomplished a lot more earlier.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have that issue. It's like it's hard to show up in spaces and be your natural self. I think it gets easier the older you get, and the more senior you become in your role, because of course with both of those comes more confidence. But I think if you could do that from an earlier age, I think that the work you're able to put out will be tremendous.
Yeah. It's one of those things, isn't it, that retrospectively you just wish was more apparent early on. But I think it's one of those catch-22s where it just can't possibly happen that way. But I certainly
Yeah.
echo
Oh yeah.
that. I certainly echo that.
Oh yeah.
If you could banish one thing from the industry, what would it be and why?
Oh man, that's a hard question. If I could banish one thing, I mean, geez, I'd probably say, look, I'll be honest, timesheets, they fucking suck. Like I was doing timesheets for like 40 minutes before I got on this call with you. Timesheets, man, it is then I get that like from the agency side, it is, everyone has to be billable. It's about like, okay, great, like charging the clients with hours worked. But it's just like I hate that business model. It's the worst. And like I spend more time doing my timesheets than a lot of meetings. It's
Yeah,
just
the
it's
irony.
literally like checking in and out, like like Ford and GM. Walk in, stamp your timesheet, and stamp it when you leave. Yeah, it's annoying. I'm sure everyone would agree to that.
Yeah, no, it kind of is. It's not. It hasn't actually come up on the pod before, but I have spoken about it in numerous episodes. But then I think I've got skin in the game here because I regularly give talks about pricing creativity and how units of time is a massive flaw of thinking about it. But that said, in the defense of timesheets, you're managing the cost, not the value you're trying to generate. So
Yeah.
I kind of see
Yeah.
it from both sides. I don't know. Number 3, are there any books that you can recommend to our listeners? This can be, this can be industry based or it can be fiction, anything that you think more people should read.
So the one, to be honest with you, the one I actually mentioned earlier was one that I always recommend. It's not how good you are; it's how good you want to be. It's just one of my favorites. But I'll do a plug, right? So there's one called "What Lucy Taught Us," and it's about essentially improving your business, like by way of process and the process in your approach. It's actually written by my father.
Ah,
With the
cool.
so if you look at Walter Geer, you'll see that Walter Geer Jr. Yeah, but it's a good book on process, and he's like project. He spent his latter portion of his career as a project manager, the first portion as an engineer working for companies like Duracell and GE. But it's a good book on understanding process and better, how to kind of move your projects forward.
Ah, wicked. Nice. Well, we'll definitely link to that in this episode for sure.
Appreciate it.
And then number 4 then is we always dedicate every episode to someone, and we bestow or hospital pass that honor, depending on your point of view, to our guest, who has to give the reason why. So would you kindly dedicate this episode to someone?
You know what I'll say? I'll give this to my wife because, to be honest with you, with what I do and what we all do in this space, it is like this shit is so time consuming, and then the constant on the run, and I think that our spouses oftentimes will get the shit end of the stick, right? Because of the time that we spend doing this stuff, and I'm able to do stuff that I really genuinely love, and I genuinely could honestly say that I couldn't do it without having her support and having someone who's consistently in my corner and there for like the good times as well as the bad. So that's what I'd have to say. So I definitely dedicate this to my wife, Talise Geer.
Awesome. Well, this episode is very proudly dedicated to Talise Geer. So as a final call to action, everyone can head over to the listing. There'll be links there to everything from Paul Arden's It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be, to What Lucy Taught Us. I'm definitely going to check that out because it's not come up before. How else can our listeners get more Walter Geer?
Any social platform, it's at Third Gears, 3RDGEERS.
At Third Gears. Great. Well, we'll make sure that link's in there as well. But listen, Walter, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a blast.
This has been amazing, man. I really appreciate the conversation. This has been good. So let's put it out there.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you for having me, man.
And thank you. And finally, thank you to everyone listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do share and review the podcast. We massively value the support. Keep your questions and guest requests coming in. To get in touch, it's easy to find Gasp online. You can check out CTA Pod on Instagram or just email hello@calltoaction.co.
Can't get no call to action. I can't get no call to action, but I try and I try and I try and I try. I can't get no call to action. Oh, I can't get no call to action. hey, hey.